Well, today we're going to present a topic which most of you are not familiar with, and that's the death of our iconic Australian, not an individual, but of a group of people that could be described as working class Renaissance people. Australians born during World War II and just after World War II. I'm not talking about the baby boomer generation, but that little group that were born during World War II and just after World War II, for the first 2 or 3 years after. That's about a 7 or 8 year gap. Now these people, like World War II veterans, are now dying out. But what we seem to have forgotten is how important they were in creating many of the rights, privileges that we take for granted. Those children, in their very early years, experienced what war can do. War's not just about those fighting and dying. It's about those left behind and the impact death and injuries have on a generation. So what do I call them? Renaissance men and women. Because they had a wide range of abilities, but more than abilities, they were involved in a wide range of campaigns. They initiated and carried out a wide range of campaigns which made the second half of the 20th century in this country one of the most important periods in terms of expanding the egalitarian program. Not the deregulation, privatisation, corporatisation, globalisation program we're faced with today, but a program which was based on that famous saying, which is so misused by so many, a fair go. They had been denied education because education cost money. They were denied healthcare because healthcare costs money. They had to go to work at a very early age, 14 or 15, to support families who were trying to grasp with the realities of the post-war situation in this country. They are the people that began to understand the nature of the unequal relationship between First Nations people and the rest of us. They were the ones who understood how important it was for the state to own essential services and to provide these essential services to everyone by sharing the burden. They understood how important the trade union movement was in terms of gaining not just legal rights, but economic rights. And this is one of the periods in history where we saw significant changes. In 1949, a referendum was passed in this country which gave the Commonwealth Government the ability to extend the pension scheme not just to old age, but sickness benefits, single parents benefits, unemployment benefits. Before, people relied on the state, inadequate state support. Then in 1967, we had that referendum, unlike the referendum in 2023 regarding a voice to Parliament, which was soundly defeated by the Australian people. This referendum in 1967, which gave the Commonwealth power to legislate on behalf of Indigenous Australians, passed with a majority of over 90%. This is when we see the beginning of the land rights movement and the support that these working class Renaissance people, many in the Communist Party of Australia or the Socialist Party of Australia or other community-based organisations, the impetus they gave to that particular struggle. And those of you who remember your history will see the growth of this particular struggle. These were the people who understood that inequality needed to be addressed, not just economically, not just in terms of First Nations people, but in terms of gender, in terms of rights for women, in terms of rights for the increasing number of migrants who came to this country after World War II under a populate or perish immigration program, which was designed to bring people here to develop the much needed infrastructure. So these people were different to us, different to the 21st century. They are ignored, ostracised, marginalised in the 21st century, in an era of self and profitability, irrespective of the human, social, environmental consequences. Because these people understood that in order for them to be free, in order for them to enjoy the economic necessities of life, that they needed to pressure government, both through the ballot box and through direct action, through protests, through occupations, through strikes. That they understood that nothing will change the distress of the working classes they were part of unless they take it into their own hands. They understood that very important issue. No wonder this was the glory time of trade unionism, where over 60% of Australian workers were in trade unions. No wonder this is the time when trade unions fought for issues outside just their economic needs, but in terms of society as a whole. This is when we saw the green bands revolution being introduced into this country in the late 60s and early 70s. This is when we saw the Labor Party pushed towards accepting a more radical agenda, which led to the election of the Whitlam-led Labor government in 1970, a government which passed more reform bills in 4 years than has been passed in the past 124 years since Federation in 1901. This occurred because this generation understood the importance of mutual aid and solidarity. This generation, this small little generation who were born during World War II and just after World War II, understood that nothing comes without struggle. But the defining moment about this generation is the fact they had things which we now scorn. They had principles. They fought for things beyond themselves and their families and their relatives, but society as a whole. They fought that so that everyone could enjoy the largesse of this country, the so-called milk and honey, which most people never get a taste of. They had principles which they lived by. They had a moral compass which was based on the fact that they did not accept exploitation in any of its formats. They knew that they needed to come together to achieve these results, and results they achieved. In the 1970s, one person working in a family could buy a home within 7 years on an average wage. It seems laughable. They did the groundwork for the struggle which allowed their children to access free education, something they never were able to, this is at the tertiary level, something which they never were able to enjoy. They were involved in that struggle to expand the social security system. Words like welfare, leaners, movers were not part of their conversation, because they understood that a social security system is a two-way street. It's not a one-way street where the state gives people money because they can't, for whatever reason, can't access the basic necessities of life. It's a two-way street. The state supports the dispossessed, the marginalised, the elderly, the sick, the single parents. The state supports this section of the population because it creates social security. It creates security in the community as a whole. That's why it's called a social security system. Social security systems. This is a generation that has been spurned, marginalised, ostracised. Has our society changed? As we embarked on the neoliberal journey with both hands, believing the solution to our own situation depended on private investment for private property. We accepted privatisation of essential services which had been built up through the struggles of this generation as the price to pay for a few extra dollars in our pockets. We accepted the growth of corporate welfare. Corporate welfare is nothing more than the government of the day giving private organisation based on a private profit, a private investment for private profit, taxpayers' money to provide services for the government at a profit. Anybody can make a profit in that situation. They understood that they had been betrayed. They had been betrayed not just by the party which many of them supported, the Labor Party of Australia, the party that took the U out of Labor. It's L-A-B-O-R, not L-A-B-O-U-R. They understood that the forces they had fought against for so long to create a fair go society, to create a more egalitarian community, to ensure that everybody had access to the basic necessities of life, whether it was food, housing, education, the list goes on and on. This was the generation that demanded public housing as a solution to the housing crisis. Well, in the 21st century, we do everything we can as a people to destroy what's left of the public housing sector and put our faith in the private sector to overcome a housing crisis which has been created through the privatisation of public housing, and a health crisis which has been created by the privatisation of many aspects of public housing, of a crisis in the public education sector which has been created by more and more and more taxpayers' resources going to private schools to not maintain their structural integrity, but to expand them to provide unnecessary extra facilities to attract more fee-paying students. This is a generation that despairs at what's happened in the 21st century. They go to their graves despairing at the changes that occurred in this society, because in the 21st century principles have been jettisoned for profit. Anybody with a moral compass is considered to be a fool. Everybody is involved in the private investment for private profit system, irrespective if they want to be or don't want to be. So everything they struggled for, everything they struggled to create because of their experiences as that tiny generation that were born during World War II and just after World War II has been lost. Not only has it been lost, the losses have been compounded by the climate emergency which has been created by giving the private investment for private profit system its head, by removing regulation, by removing competition, by privatising successful public institutions which look after the basic needs of people, by allowing corporations to get bigger and bigger and strangle what's left of the small business sector. It's all very well to say 5 million people are employed by small business, about 40% of the working population, but the reality is that 90% of small businesses close or fail within 5 years of starting. And if you walk into any shopping mall around this country, all you will see is the same corporate brands over and over again. But there is hope. And that's what these presentations are about. Hope. Hope is the love child of desire and expectation. The desire for change and the expectation that change will occur. We have now reached a crisis point in our society. We know that we've been sold a very, very sick pup. But we don't know how to move forward to change the agenda like this lost generation did, to assist all of us. And that's why public interest before corporate interest was created. It's created to give people an opportunity to put the interests of the many, that's the public, before the interests of the few, that's the corporate sector. Although our journey has been slow, membership has not been as great as we expected when we first launched in 2015. The reality is social conditions are changing. We now know the direction this lost generation took is the direction we need to take again. Issue-orientated politics come and go. Personality politics come and go. Elections come and go. But inequality grows in an era of instant communication, in an area of universal education. And to address that, we need to put public interests before corporate interests.